She hasn't even played her US Open match yet, and a company worth billions just bet on her like they already know how her whole career ends. Something happened 10 days before that tournament that almost nobody noticed, and once I show it to you, you will never read a sponsorship announcement the same way again. Because this isn't a story about a tennis player getting rich. This is a story about a room most of us never get to see, a boardroom, thousands of miles from any tennis court, where executives looked at one 21-year-old and decided she was worth more than the trophy everyone else was waiting for her to win. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what they saw before the rest of the world did. Stay with me, because the moment I break down is buried in a single press release line that 99% of people scrolled straight past. Before we go there, if you actually care about the stories behind women's tennis, the ones the big outlets never slow down enough to explain, do me one favor. Hit subscribe right now, before you forget, because I don't just report what happened, I show you why it happened, and there is a lot more coming on this exact story that you do not want to miss. If this channel has ever taught you something new about the sport you love, this is the smallest way to say thank you, and it means everything to a channel like this one. Okay. Let's get into it. August 10th, 2026. A Monday. New York is 14 days from the US Open main draw, and Flushing Meadows is already crawling with sponsor crews building hospitality tents behind Arthur Ashe Stadium. On the other side of the planet, in Melbourne, it's the dead middle of the Australian winter. Rod Laver Arena is dark. The next Australian Open is 5 months away. And somewhere between those two cities, between a tournament that hasn't started and a tournament that's already over, Marriott's Asia-Pacific office puts out a press release. It's short. It doesn't lead with a number. It doesn't announce a contract length. It says one thing clearly: Alex Eala is now the face of Marriott Bonvoy's Tennis the World campaign for Asia-Pacific, excluding China. 10 days before the US Open. Not after it. And that detail alone should stop you, because the entire sports marketing industry runs on the opposite instinct. Brands wait. They watch the slam. They see the trophy get lifted, and then they open the checkbook. Marriott didn't do that. And when a company that size moves early on a player ranked 20th in the world, the real question isn't how much she got paid. The question is, what did Marriott see that the rest of the market hadn't priced in yet? That's what this video is really about. Not the deal. The timing of the deal. Because most of the coverage right now is treating this like an ordinary sponsorship story: famous player, famous brand, big check, congratulations. I understand why that framing is easy. But it misses what actually happened here, and it misses it in a way that matters if you want to understand where Alex Eala's career is heading over the next 3 years, not just the next 3 weeks. Quick grounding, in case you're arriving to this story cold. Alex Eala is a 21-year-old professional tennis player from the Philippines. She turned pro in 2020, spent her development years at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, and until this summer was a solid but unspectacular top 50 player with a small, devoted following. Then, in the space of about 6 weeks in mid-2026, 3 things happened that changed her entire category. At Wimbledon, in the 3rd round, she knocked out defending champion Iga Swiatek in a brutal 7-6, 6-2 battle on center court, ending Swiatek's title defense and pushing herself into the 4th round, the deepest any Filipino has ever gone at a Grand Slam. Then, at the Mubadala City DC Open in Washington in early August, she put together the most disruptive week of her career, beating Jessica Pegula, Elena Svitolina, and Naomi Osaka back-to-back to win her first ever WTA singles title, the first ever won by a Filipino player on tour. The day after that trophy lift, the rankings updated, and she stood at world number 20. A career high. The highest ranking any Filipino has ever held on either tour. That is the player Marriott signed 6 days later. Now here's where the story gets strange, and I want you to really sit with this, because there are 4 things about this deal that don't add up on the surface, and every single one of them is a clue. First, if Marriott wanted a US Open bounce, if the whole point was to attach the brand to whatever Eala was about to do at Flushing Meadows, the calendar makes no sense. You don't announce your new ambassador 10 days before her slam. You announce her at the slam, or after it, once the highlight reel is already cut and the brand can ride the wave. Every advertising executive who has ever built a media plan around a live sporting event knows this rule. Marriott's own competitors know this rule. And Marriott broke it. They signed her right after a fourth-round loss to Belinda Bencic at the Canadian Open in Toronto, a loss that, notably, still came in front of a sold-out night session where thousands of tickets cleared within half an hour of her name going up on the draw. Hold on to that detail. It matters more later. But sit with the paradox first. Marriott moved before the US Open, not after. That's a choice. What were they seeing? Second, the campaign she's the face of isn't anchored to the US Open, Wimbledon, or Roland Garros. It's anchored to the Australian Open, where Marriott Bonvoy is entering its 6th consecutive year as official hotel partner, with the 2027 edition scheduled for January 11th through the 31st. The press release makes this explicit. Marriott Bonvoy members get early access to Australian Open 2027 tickets. That's the actual deliverable. So the world number 20 in women's tennis, right in the middle of her US Open build-up, has been signed to promote a tournament on the other side of the planet, 5 months into the future. Why? Third, Marriott didn't sign her for Asia-Pacific. They signed her for Asia-Pacific excluding China. It's in the headline. It's in the campaign name. Now think about that carve-out for a second. China is, by almost any measure, the single biggest tennis market in Asia, the biggest sponsorship spend, the biggest television audience, an entire WTA swing built around Chinese venues. If you're signing a regional tennis ambassador, the obvious move is to include China. Marriott deliberately didn't. They drew a line around Southeast Asia, South Asia, Oceania, Japan, and Korea, and said, this is her region. Why exclude the biggest market on the continent? And fourth, the quietest one, and maybe the loudest once you notice it. Marriott's announcement contains no dollar figure and no personal perk for Alex Eala at all. You've probably seen numbers floating around online, 2 million a year, unlimited flights, wild 8-figure totals. I want to be completely clear with you, none of those numbers appear in Marriott's press release. None appear in any of the trade coverage. None appear on Marriott's own campaign page. Every one of those figures is unconfirmed, recycled across social posts that get a little more exaggerated each time they're shared. What the release does disclose is a benefit, but it's not a benefit to her. It's a benefit to Marriott's members. Australian Open presale access. Exclusive Bonvoy Moments experiences. The deal isn't built around Alex Eala the athlete. It's built around Marriott Bonvoy the loyalty program. Why would Marriott want their members close to her, instead of the usual setup where the brand rides on the athlete's fame? Here's where the assumption most people carry into this story falls apart. You've been assuming Marriott signed Alex Eala because she's a rising tennis player. That's the default read. It's how sponsorship stories always get told. Player gets famous, brand shows up, brand pays her to wear the logo. That's the story you've heard 100 times about 100 different athletes. And it's the wrong story here. What actually happened is this: Marriott didn't sign Alex Eala because she's a tennis player. Marriott signed her because she's the most credible entry point into a region the company has decided is the future of its loyalty program. The tennis is the delivery mechanism. She is the delivery mechanism. The actual product being sold is Marriott Bonvoy membership across Southeast Asia, aimed at a customer base Marriott's own research says is travel hungry, loyalty hungry, and still up for grabs. That's why they moved before the US Open. That's why the campaign is anchored to Melbourne, not New York. That's why they carved out China. And that's why the disclosed perk goes to members, not to her. Take a breath, because I want that to land before we prove it. Most sponsorship coverage flattens athletes into billboards, deal announced, number quoted, everyone moves on. What Marriott did with Eala is the opposite. They didn't put her on a billboard. They wrote her into their business model. Proof 1, the timing itself, and how sharply it breaks from what marketers sometimes call the Raducanu template. Back in 2021, Emma Raducanu won the US Open as a qualifier, an almost unheard-of run, and in the weeks after, she signed roughly a dozen major sponsorship deals in a rush, all at post-slam, inflated pricing. Marketing writers have picked over that period for years since, and the common critique isn't that she signed too many deals, it's that she signed them at the very top of the market, in a way that got hard to sustain once her ranking naturally settled.